The last seat on the midnight carriage cost Sonara everything she had. 3 copper coins pressed into a driver's palm. The final remnants of her mother's ring, sold that morning to a pawnbroker who hadn't met her eyes. Everything she owned in the world now fit inside the leather satchel clutched against her chest, and even that felt too heavy as exhaustion clawed at her bones. Carveth Mountain Pass, she told the driver. The village of Ashford, at the base. He'd grunted, gestured toward the last carriage in the line, and turned away before she could ask why his hand trembled. Now, climbing the iron steps in the darkness, Sonara understood. The carriage was wrong. Not broken or damaged, wrong in a way that made her skin prickle and her breath catch. The wood gleamed too dark, nearly black, carved with symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. The curtains were drawn tight across every window, blocking even the faint moonlight. And the air inside. The air smelled of pine forests and approaching storms and something untamed. Something that made her heart race for reasons she couldn't name. "I'm sorry," Sonara stammered, already stepping backward. "I've made a mistake. Wrong carriage. I'll just—" The door slammed shut behind her. She spun, grabbing for the handle, but it held fast. Locked, sealed. As if the carriage itself had decided she wasn't leaving. "Sit down." The voice came from the shadows at the far end of the cabin. Female, calm, touched with what might have been amusement. Sonara's eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. 3 figures sat across from her on the velvet bench. 2 men, their faces obscured by the angle of their hoods, their bodies unnaturally still. And between them, a woman perhaps a few years older than Sonara herself, with silver-white hair that caught the dim light and eyes that gleamed like polished amber. Those eyes were fixed on Sonara with an intensity that made her want to press herself against the locked door. "There's been a misunderstanding." Sonara tried again, fighting to keep her voice steady. "The driver directed me here, but I'm meant for the public coach to Ashford. My brother is ill. I have medicine to collect. I don't have time for—" "Sit. Down." This voice was different. Male. Deep. It resonated through the cabin like distant thunder, and Sonara felt it in her chest, in her bones, in places she didn't have names for. One of the hooded figures had spoken, the larger one. He sat motionless, but she could feel the weight of his attention like a physical force. Her legs folded beneath her without permission. She sat. "Better," the woman said, and smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "Forgive my brother's tone. He forgets his manners when he's—" She paused, tilting her head as if listening to a melody only she could hear. "Surprised." "Your brother," Sonara repeated. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. The carriage had begun to move, wheels rattling against cobblestones, carrying her somewhere she hadn't agreed to go. "Please, I need to get to Ashford. My brother Corvin, he's only 12. He's dying. If I don't return with the mountain herbs by the new moon, he won't die." The words cut through her panic like a blade. The hooded man had spoken again, and this time, Sonara saw him move. Saw him lean forward into the sliver of moonlight that crept between the curtains. She forgot how to breathe. He was beautiful in the way that storms were beautiful, in the way that wolves were beautiful. Sharp features carved from shadow and moonlight. Dark hair falling across a brow furrowed with what looked almost like pain. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping his knees as if restraining himself from action. But his eyes were the color of winter frost, and they were locked onto her face with an intensity that felt like burning. "Your brother will live," he said, each word seeming to cost him effort. "You have my word." "How could you possibly—" "Theron." The woman's voice carried a warning. She placed one elegant hand on his arm. Slowly. The man, Theron, made a sound low in his throat, caught between growl and groan. His eyes never left Sonara's face, and she watched in frozen fascination as the frost blue began to shimmer, began to shift, began to burn into molten gold. "What?" Sonara's back hit the carriage wall. What's happening to your eyes? Theron's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. He turned his face away sharply, and when he spoke again, his voice was strained to breaking. Lysara, get her away from me. The woman, Lysara, didn't move. Instead, she studied Sonara with that amber gaze, cataloging every detail of her face, her hair, and her trembling hands. Then she smiled again. Wider this time, delighted. Oh, I don't think so, brother. Lysara reached across the cabin and caught Sonara's chin with gentle fingers, turning her face toward the meager light. Do you have any idea how long we've been searching? How many false trails? How many disappointments? Lysara. She walked right onto our carriage, Theron. She found us. Lysara's thumb brushed across Sonara's cheek, and the touch sent sparks cascading down her spine. No, I won't be sending her anywhere. Sonara jerked her chin free. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know who you are. I just want to go home to my brother. Lysara sat back, folding her hands in her lap with the satisfaction of a cat who'd caught a prize. You'll see your brother again, little one, I promise you that. Her amber eyes flickered to Theron, who sat rigid as stone, his face still turned away, his breathing harsh and uneven. But first, there's a truth you should know. What? Sonara whispered. Lysara's smile could have cut glass. You're going to be my brother's mate. The carriage rattled on through the darkness while Sonara's mind refused to process what she'd just heard. Mate. The word hung in the air between them, primitive and absolute, carrying weight that pressed against her chest. She wanted to laugh, to demand they stop this absurd joke and let her go. But Lysara's expression held no trace of humor. And Theron. Theron still hadn't looked at her again. His hands had moved from his knees to grip the edge of the seat, and even in the darkness, Sonara could see his knuckles had gone white. A fine tremor ran through his massive frame, as if he was fighting some internal battle with every breath. You're insane, Sonara heard herself say. Both of you. I'm not anyone's mate. I'm a seamstress's daughter from a village so small it doesn't appear on most maps. You've clearly mistaken me for someone else. Have we? Lysara's voice was mild, conversational. Tell me, Sonara. Yes, I know your name. I've known it for quite some time. Tell me about the shadows you see. Sonara's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you mean. No? Lysara tilted her head, that predatory smile still playing at her lips. The darkness that gathers around the dying, the weight that settles over someone's shoulders hours before death claims them? She leaned forward. You've seen it since childhood, haven't you? That's how you knew your mother wouldn't survive your brother's birth. How you knew the baker's wife would fall ill last winter. How you know, even now, that little Corvin is running out of time. The words hit like physical blows. No one knew about that. No one. Sonara had spent her entire life hiding the shadows she saw, the death marks that appeared to her eyes alone. She'd learned young that speaking of such things brought only fear and suspicion. And yet, this strange woman in a strange carriage spoke of Sonara's deepest secret as casually as discussing the weather. How? The word came out cracked, broken. How do you know that? Because I see things too, little one. Lysara's amber eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Actually glowed, Sonara realized with a start, producing their own light. Different things than you. Threads of possibility. Paths of fate. I've been watching your thread since before you drew your first breath, waiting for the moment it would cross with ours. Enough. Theron's voice cut through the cabin, ragged and desperate. Lysara, you're frightening her. I can smell her fear, and I can't. He broke off, a sound escaping his throat that was more animal than human. I can't stay in this space with her much longer, not without... He didn't finish the sentence, but his tone made heat bloom unexpectedly in Sonara's chest. The third figure, the other man who had remained silent throughout, spoke for the first time. We're approaching the mountain pass, my king. Shall I signal for a halt? My king. Sonara's gaze snapped to Theron. He was turned away from her still, his profile visible in the dim light, the strong jaw, the aristocratic nose, the tension visible in every line of his body. King. This tortured, trembling man was a king. No. Theron's voice had steadied slightly. We keep moving. The Voss patrols have been ranging further lately. We don't stop until we reach the Valdrin border. Voss. The name sent a genuine spike of fear through Sonara. Lord Merrick Voss and his soldiers had passed through her village 2 months ago, hunting for something. They'd questioned everyone, searched every home, and left 3 buildings burning as a warning. You're hiding from Lord Voss, she said slowly, pieces clicking together in her mind. That's why the black carriage, the symbols, the secrecy. You're the ones he's hunting. Theron finally turned to look at her. His eyes had faded back to that winter blue, but they were no less intense, no less consuming. Yes, he said simply. Why? What did you do? A muscle flexed in his jaw. We existed. That's crime enough for men like Voss. The carriage lurched suddenly, throwing Sonara forward. She would have hit the opposite bench face first if Theron hadn't moved, faster than any human should be able to move, and caught her. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest to steady her. For one frozen moment they were pressed together, her hands splayed against the hard plane of his torso, his face inches from her own. And then she felt it. The shadow. The mark of dying. Clinging to him like a second skin, darker and heavier than any she'd ever witnessed. This man wasn't just dying. He was drowning in it. Days, perhaps. A week at most. Death had already begun to claim him. You're dying, she breathed. Theron went rigid beneath her touch. His eyes searched her face and something flickered there. Surprise, then understanding, then a bone-deep resignation that made her heart clench. Yes, he said quietly. I am. Theron, no. Lysara started forward, alarm cracking her composure for the first time. But Theron silenced her with a raised hand, his gaze still locked on Sonara's face. She deserves the truth, sister. All of it. He drew a slow breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentle, almost tender. I was wounded 3 weeks ago. A blade coated with wolfsbane, a poison designed specifically for my kind. Our healers have tried everything. Nothing works. Your kind, Sonara whispered. She should pull away. Every instinct screamed at her to put distance between herself and this man who wasn't fully human, but her hands wouldn't obey. Her body seemed to recognize something her mind hadn't yet accepted. We are Valdrin, Theron said, the Wolfborn, the old blood, and I am their king. His hand rose slowly, giving her every opportunity to flinch away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch sent lightning cascading through her veins. I don't understand, she breathed. What does any of this have to do with me? Theron's eyes flickered gold again, just for an instant, and his voice dropped to a register that resonated in her bones. Everything, he said. It has everything to do with you. They stopped at a hidden way station as dawn began to light in the sky, a stone structure built into the mountainside, invisible from the road unless you knew exactly where to look. Sonara's legs nearly buckled when she finally stepped down from the carriage. Hours of tension and fear and confusion had drained her, and the thin mountain air made her head swim. She braced herself against the carriage wheel, fighting to stay upright. Warm hands caught her elbows from behind. She knew it was him before she turned, knew it from the way her skin tingled beneath his touch. Knew it from the scent that had slowly become familiar through the long night. Pine and storm and something wild that made her want to lean closer even as her mind screamed warnings. Easy, Theron murmured near her ear. You're safe here. I'm not safe anywhere near you. The words came out sharper than she intended, and she felt him flinch. No, he agreed quietly. You're probably not. He released her and stepped back, putting careful distance between them. In the morning light, Sonara could see his face clearly for the first time. The darkness clinging to him was worse than she'd realized. It clung to his features like a mask, dimming the color of his skin, hollowing his cheeks. Whatever poison was killing him, it was working fast. And yet he'd spent all night worried about her comfort, her fear, her understanding. "Come inside." Lysara appeared at Sonara's elbow. "There's food and a fire. My brother needs to rest and you—" She studied Sonara with knowing eyes. "You need to understand what's happening to you." "Nothing is happening to me." Even as she said it, Sonara knew it was a lie. Some boundaries she hadn't known existed had been crossed. She was aware of Theron now in ways that defied explanation, could sense where he stood without looking, could feel his breathing as if it were her own. The way station's interior was sparse but clean, a stone hearth with a fire already crackling, wooden benches along the walls, a single door leading to what must be sleeping quarters. Lysara guided Sonara to a bench near the warmth, while Theron and the guard spoke in low voices near the entrance. "You feel it, don't you?" Lysara sat beside her, voice pitched low. "The pull, the awareness of him." Sonara stared at the flames. "I don't know what I feel. Your gift lets you see death. My gift lets me see fate." Lysara's hand covered Sonara's gently. "I saw your thread intertwined with his 2 years before you were born. I've watched it grow stronger, brighter, and more certain with every passing season. You are his mate, Sonara, the only one who could ever complete him." "Complete him? I don't even know him." "Your soul knows him. Your blood knows him." Lysara's grip tightened. "And somewhere deep inside, the part of you that sees what others cannot, that part has already recognized what he is to you." Sonara wanted to argue, wanted to deny everything. But the words wouldn't come, because Lysara was right. Some part of her had recognized Theron the moment their eyes met, had reached for him before her mind could intervene, had felt something slot into place, like a key finding its lock. A commotion near the door made both women look up. Theron had staggered, catching himself against the wall, his face twisted in pain. The guard reached for him, but Theron waved him off. "It's fine," he gritted out. "Just need a moment." But it wasn't fine. Sonara could see the dark weight pulsing around him, growing stronger, feeding on whatever strength he had left. The poison was accelerating. She was on her feet before she realized she'd moved. "Let me see." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. She crossed the room and reached for his wounded shoulder, the one he'd been favoring all night. "The poison. Let me see it." Theron's hand caught her wrist before she could touch him. His grip was gentle but immovable, and his eyes had gone gold again, bright and burning and not entirely human. "Don't," he rasped. "If you touch me right now, I won't be able to stop myself." "Stop yourself from what?" "From claiming you." The admission seemed to tear out of him. "From marking you as mine in a way that can't be undone. The wolf in me?" He shuddered, fighting for control. "It recognizes you. It wants you. It's taking everything I have not to—" He broke off. But she understood. The hunger in his eyes said everything his words couldn't. "You're dying," Sonara said softly. "I can see it, Theron. The shadow is consuming you. Another day, maybe 2, and it will claim you entirely." "I know. Then let me help." "You can't." His voice cracked. "There's no cure. We've tried everything." "You haven't tried me." The room went silent. Lysara had risen, her amber eyes wide. Even the guard had frozen mid-step. Theron stared at Sonara as if she'd suggested something impossible. "You don't know what you're offering?" "No," she admitted. "I don't. But I know that I can see death, and I've never been able to do anything about it. I've watched people fade while I stood helpless. Watched the shadows claim them while I—" Her voice broke, and she thought of Corvin, her sweet little brother, wasting away in a bed too big for his shrinking frame. "I'm tired of watching people die." She reached for him again, and this time, he didn't stop her. The moment her palm pressed against his wounded shoulder, the world exploded. Power surged through her. Not from her, but from him. Wild and primal and ancient, it crashed into her gift like a wave striking a cliff. She felt her own ability rise to meet it, the death sight flaring brighter than ever before. And she saw. Not just the shadow, but the source. The poison was alive, a dark, sentient thing wrapped around his heart, feeding on his strength, multiplying with every beat. It sensed her intrusion and recoiled, hissing like a serpent. But it wasn't alone. Beneath the poison, beneath the darkness, she sensed something else. A power that recognized her own. A soul that had been calling to her across years and distance and impossibility. His wolf. It rose toward her like a creature surfacing from deep water. Enormous, magnificent, and desperate. It brushed against her consciousness, and she felt its plea as clearly as spoken words. Save him. Please. He is yours. Save him. I don't know how, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. But her gift had other ideas. Light began to pour from her hands, golden and pure, nothing like the death shadows she'd always seen. It wrapped around the poison like chains, binding it, burning it, and forcing it back. Theron made a sound she would never forget. Half groan, half howl, all agony transforming into something else. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer, his face buried in her neck, and then his teeth pierced her throat. Pain exploded through her. Sharp, shocking, immediate. She tried to cry out, but the sound dissolved as the pain transformed. Heat replaced the hurt. Pleasure replaced the fear. Something ancient and irrevocable poured through the wound, binding her to him in ways she couldn't understand. She felt his mind crash into hers, felt centuries of loneliness, years of searching, the desperate hope he'd tried to kill when hope only brought more pain, and beneath it all, a love so fierce and immediate that it stole her breath. Mine. His consciousness growled against hers. Finally. Mine. Then darkness claimed her, and she felt herself falling into his arms. Sonara woke to warmth. A fire crackled nearby. Soft furs cushioned her body, and a weight pressed against her side, heavy, warm, and rising with slow, steady breaths. Her eyes flew open. She was lying on a low pallet near the hearth, wrapped in blankets she didn't recognize. And pressed against her back, one arm draped protectively over her waist, was Theron. He was asleep. Truly asleep, not unconscious. She could tell the difference now, could feel the steady pulse of his presence against her awareness like a second heartbeat. His face was peaceful in a way it hadn't been since she'd first seen him, the lines of pain smoothed away, and the shadow of death. Sonara pushed herself up carefully, not wanting to wake him, and turned to study his face. The darkness that had clung so heavily to his features was fainter now. Still present, but diminished. Whatever she'd done, whatever they'd done together, had pushed the poison back. Not eliminated. Just contained. Corvin. The thought of her brother surfaced through the haze. How many days had passed? Was he still holding on, waiting for medicine that might never arrive? You're awake. Lysara's voice came from across the room. The woman sat in a wooden chair by the window, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light. Had Sonara slept through the entire morning? How long? She asked, her voice rough. 6 hours. Lysara rose and moved closer, her amber eyes studying Sonara with open curiosity. You've been unconscious since the claiming. The claiming. The word sent a jolt through Sonara's body, and she raised a hand to her throat. She expected to find torn flesh, dried blood, the evidence of teeth-breaking skin. Instead, her fingers found smooth skin. Tender, yes. Sensitive in a way that made her shiver. But whole. Healed. Just as the wound should have been impossible. What happened to me? She whispered. Lysara knelt beside the pallet, her expression unusually gentle. You saved him. Whatever power you carry, it met his, and pushed back the poison. The healers are saying it's a miracle. The corruption has retreated almost to the original wound. He was days from death, and now he has months. Perhaps more. Months. Not a cure then. Just a reprieve. But I didn't. I don't know what I did. The light that came from my hands, that's never happened before. I only see death. I can't heal. I've never been able to. You couldn't heal before? Lysara interrupted. Before you touched your mate. Before your powers combined. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Sonara's face, the same gesture Theron had made in the carriage. He's a wolf-born king, Sonara. His power is ancient and vast. And you are a death seer. One of the rarest gifts in any world. Alone, you could only witness. Together, she smiled. Together, you might be able to change what you see. Movement behind Sonara made her turn. Theron was awake. Those winter blue eyes open and fixed on her face. The intensity hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger. But there was something else there now. Something vulnerable. How do you feel? His voice was rough with sleep. I should be asking you that. She couldn't quite meet his eyes. You're the one who was dying. I was. He pushed himself up slowly, and she noticed that his movements were stronger now. More fluid. You gave me time I didn't have. Time I didn't deserve. I didn't do anything. Not intentionally. You stayed. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. When you realized what I was, when you understood the danger, you stayed anyway. You tried to help me. His thumb traced circles across her knuckles, and she felt each touch echo through her entire body. No one has ever... He didn't finish, but she understood. The loneliness she'd felt crashing through their connection hadn't been exaggerated. This man, this king, had carried the weight of his people and his death in solitude for longer than she wanted to imagine. The bite, she said quietly. Lysara called it a claiming. What does that mean? Theron's jaw tightened. It means I've bound you to me in a way I had no right to. The wolf. When you touched me, when your power met mine, I lost control. I'm sorry. I never wanted to take your choice away. Did you? Sonara turned to face him fully. Take my choice, I mean? He frowned. The claiming mark is permanent. It can't be undone. That's not what I asked. She held his gaze, searching for something she couldn't name. Did you force this? Or did I walk into it? Lysara stood quietly and moved toward the door, giving them privacy. Sonara barely noticed. You walked into it, Theron said finally. But you didn't understand what... I understood enough. Sonara touched her throat again, feeling the sensitivity where his teeth had marked her. I understood that you were dying and I could help. That's all I needed to know. Something shifted in his expression. The vulnerability cracked open into wonder. You're not afraid of me. I'm terrified of you, she admitted, but I'm also... She trailed off, unable to find words for the pull she felt, the rightness. The sense that she'd stumbled onto something she'd been searching for her entire life without knowing it. Also what? He asked softly. Before she could answer, the door burst open. The guard from the carriage stood in the entrance, his face ashen. My king. Riders approaching. Flying the Voss banner. All the warmth drained from the room. Theron was on his feet instantly, the weakness of illness replaced by coiled readiness. How many? 30, at least. They're not searching. They're heading directly here. Lysara reappeared in the doorway, her amber eyes flickering with that otherworldly light. Someone told them, she said grimly. They know exactly where we are. Theron's hand found Sonara's shoulder, drawing her close behind him. His body had gone rigid, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of command. Gather everyone, we move in 5 minutes. His grip tightened on Sonara. I won't let them touch you. But even as he said it, Sonara felt something stir in her chest. Something that had been sleeping before that moment in the carriage, before the bite. Something that was beginning to wake up. They ran. Not on foot. Sonara would never have survived that. Theron swept her into his arms before she could protest, and then they were moving through the way station's back passages, through a tunnel carved into the mountain itself, emerging into a forest so dense the afternoon sun barely penetrated. "Don't look back," Theron commanded, his arms tightening around her. "Whatever you hear, don't look." She heard plenty, shouts echoing from the way station behind them, the clash of steel, a scream that cut off too quickly. And beneath it all, a sound that made her blood sing and her skin prickle, howling. Dozens of voices raised in a chorus that was somehow beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Wolves. His wolves. Fighting to give them time to escape. "Your people," Sonara's breath caught. "They're dying for us. They're fighting for their king." Theron's jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. And for his mate. The word hit her like a physical blow. Mate. He meant her. Despite everything, despite the chaos surrounding them, warmth spread through her chest. They ran until Sonara's ears rang with the silence of distance. Until the sounds of battle faded to nothing. Until Theron finally slowed at the edge of a ravine, his breathing barely elevated despite the miles they'd covered. "Here," Lysara said, pointing to a narrow crevice in the rock face. "The sanctuary caves. Voss doesn't know about these." Theron set Sonara down gently, his hands lingering at her waist. In the dappled forest light, she could see his face clearly, the strain around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. The mark of dying had grown darker again during their flight. Whatever reprieve her power had given him, the exertion was costing him. "You're hurting," she said. "I'm fine." "You're lying." She reached for his face before she could stop herself, her palm pressing against his cheek. The connection sparked between them instantly, that electric awareness that had been building since the claiming. "I can feel it now. Your pain. It's like it's my own." Theron closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "The bond," he murmured. "It grows stronger. Soon you'll feel everything I feel. Is that normal?" "Nothing about this is normal." He opened his eyes, and the vulnerability there stole her breath. "The claiming should have killed you, Sonara. Humans don't survive the bite. They never have. But you?" His voice roughened. "You're still here. Still breathing. Still looking at me like I'm not the monster who attacked you." "You didn't attack me. You were dying, and your wolf?" "My wolf wanted you." The admission seemed to cost him. "Still wants you. Every moment I'm near you, it takes everything I have not to complete what I started. Not to mark you so thoroughly that every wolf in existence would know you're mine." Heat flooded Sonara's cheeks. And would that be so terrible? The question surprised them both. Theron went still, searching her face. "You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me." Before he could answer, Lysara's sharp voice cut through the moment. "Theron, we have a problem." They turned to find Lysara staring at her own palm, where a small cut had appeared, blood welling from skin that had been whole moments before. "What is that?" Sonara asked. "A message." Lysara's face had gone bloodless. "From the pack. Voss didn't just attack the way station. He's found the main encampment. He's holding our people hostage." Her amber eyes lifted to meet Theron's. "He's demanding you surrender yourself in exchange for their lives." The silence that followed was devastating. Sonara watched Theron's expression shift. From shock to fury to something that looked horribly like acceptance. His people. His responsibility. His burden to bear. "No," she heard herself say. "Theron, no. You can't." "I have to." His voice was quiet, resolved. 300 lives, Sonara. Families. Children. I won't let them die for me. "So you'll just let him kill you instead?" "I'll buy time." He turned to Lysara. Take her to the northern sanctuary. The elders there can protect her until— Until what? Sonara grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. Until Voss finishes slaughtering your people? Until the poison takes what's left of you? Tears burned in her eyes. You promised my brother would live. You gave me your word. How can you keep that promise if you're dead? Something cracked in Theron's expression. He pulled her against him suddenly, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other pressed flat against her spine. She felt his lips brush her hair, felt the shudder that ran through his massive frame. I will come back to you, he said against her ear. Nothing in this world or any other will keep me from you. Do you understand? Theron, say you understand. I understand, she whispered, even though she didn't. Even though every fiber of her being screamed that letting him go was wrong. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. Then, slowly, deliberately, he pressed his forehead to hers, breathed her in, let the moment stretch into something sacred. You are mine, he growled softly, and I am yours. Whatever happens next, remember that. Then he was gone. One moment he stood before her, and the next, a massive wolf with silver-gray fur and eyes like winter frost bounded into the forest. Other wolves emerged from the shadows, dozens of them, falling into formation behind their king. Sonara watched until the last tail disappeared into the trees. Only then did she let herself fall to her knees, her hand pressed to the mark on her throat, feeling the bond stretch thin as distance grew between them. He'll come back, Lysara said quietly, kneeling beside her. He promised. But Sonara had seen the shadow of death, had felt its hungry pulse, and she knew promises meant nothing to the grave. 7 days. 7 days of hiding in the northern sanctuary, a network of caves so deep in the mountains that sunlight never reached them. 7 days of pacing stone corridors and questioning every messenger who arrived. 7 days of Lysara's careful reassurances that grew less convincing with each passing hour. 7 days of silence from Theron. The bond told Sonara he was alive. She could feel him distantly, a faint pulse at the edge of her consciousness, like a heartbeat heard through walls. But the connection kept flickering, growing weaker, and then surging back with desperate intensity before fading again. Something was wrong. Something beyond the poison, beyond the capture, beyond anything Lysara would admit. And Sonara's body was changing. It started small. Sounds that should have been inaudible became sharp and clear. Whispered conversations 3 chambers away, the skittering of mice in distant tunnels, the heartbeats of everyone around her. Then her sense of smell sharpened until she could identify each person in the sanctuary by scent alone. Then came the dreams. Every night, without fail, Theron came to her. He would appear in her chamber as if he'd walked through walls, his frost-colored eyes burning with that now familiar gold. He would kneel beside her bed and take her hand, pressing desperate kisses to her palm, her wrist, the inside of her elbow. My heart, he would whisper, and she would feel the words echo through the bond. My soul, hold on for me, just a little longer. Where are you? She would ask. What's happening to you? But he never answered that. He would simply gather her against him, bury his face in her neck, right where his mark branded her skin, and breathe her in like she was the only air he needed. You're so strong, he murmured against her throat, stronger than you know. When the time comes, don't fight it. Let yourself become what you were always meant to be. What does that mean? You'll understand soon. His arms tightened. I'm sorry I can't be there when it happens. I'm sorry for all of it. And then she would wake, alone on her pallet, his scent still clinging to her skin. They're real, she told Lysara on the 5th morning. The dreams. He's actually there, isn't he? Some part of him. Lysara wouldn't meet her eyes. The bond allows certain connections, especially between mates who haven't completed the claiming. What aren't you telling me? Silence. Lysara. Sonara grabbed the other woman's arm. What aren't you telling me? The seer's composure finally cracked. The poison is accelerating. Whatever reprieve your power gave him, Voss found a way to reverse it. He's been... She stopped, swallowing hard. He's been torturing Theron. Using the wolf's bane to weaken him, then letting him heal just enough to start again. The world tilted. Synara's knees buckled and she would have fallen if Lysara hadn't caught her. He's dying, Synara whispered. I can feel it. The darkness. It's growing again. Yes. How long? Days. Maybe less. She thought of Corvin alone in his bed, waiting for medicine that would never come. And now Theron, suffering in a dungeon while she hid in caves. The pain hit Synara without warning, a spike of agony that drove through her chest and radiated outward. She screamed, her back arching, her hands clawing at the stone floor. It's happening, Lysara breathed. The transformation. Your body is trying to complete what the bite started. But something was wrong. The pain wasn't just physical. It was the bond, stretching to breaking point. Through the agony, Synara felt Theron's presence flicker violently, then vanish entirely. No, she choked out. No, no, no. Synara, listen to me. Lysara gripped her shoulders. You need to calm down. If you fight the change while the bond is unstable, he's gone. Tears streamed down Synara's face. I can't feel him anymore. The bond, it's empty. He's not dead, Lysara said firmly. If he were dead, you would know. You would feel it like your own heart stopping. Then what happened? Before Lysara could answer, a messenger burst into the chamber. Young, terrified, out of breath. Lady Lysara, Lord Voss has sent a proclamation. The boy's voice shook. The Alpha King has been sentenced to death. The execution is set for the blood moon. 3 days from now. The chamber seemed to compress around Synara. 3 days. Theron had 3 days to live. She pushed herself to her feet despite the pain still racking her body. Her legs trembled, her vision blurred. But she forced herself to stand. Where is he being held? Synara, you can't... Lysara started. Where? The messenger swallowed. Voss Keep. In the Iron Valley. But it's impenetrable. Hundreds of guards. Wolf's Bane at every entrance. No one can... I can. The words came from somewhere deep inside Synara. Somewhere that had been sleeping her entire life. I can see death, Lysara. I can feel it. And I will not watch it claim him. She took 1 step toward the door. The pain hit again. Worse this time. Her bones seemed to splinter inside her skin. Her muscles tore and reformed. She collapsed, screaming, as her body tried to become something it didn't know how to be. The change. Lysara knelt beside her. It's fighting you because the bond is incomplete, without Theron to anchor you. Then get me to Theron. You'll die trying. Synara looked up through tear-blurred eyes. I'm dying anyway. You said it yourself. I can't complete the transformation alone. She gripped Lysara's hand with desperate strength. If I have to die, I'd rather die trying to save him than hiding in a cave while they execute him. Something shifted in Lysara's amber eyes. Respect, perhaps. Recognition. You really are his mate, she said softly. Then help me. The seer was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. There might be a way. She pressed a blood-marked stone into Synara's palm. When the time comes, break it. We'll find you. The plan was madness. Lysara's contact inside Voss Keep was a kitchen servant with wolf-born sympathies, a human woman whose daughter had been saved by a Valdrin healer years ago. She could get Synara inside the fortress, but beyond that, there were no guarantees. The dungeons are 3 levels below ground, Lysara explained as they huddled in a forest clearing, the walls of Voss Keep visible through the trees. Wolf's Bane torches at every entrance. Even if you reach him, getting out will be nearly impossible. What about the blood moon? Synara asked. The messenger said the execution is set for the blood moon. Lysara's expression grew complicated. The blood moon strengthens wolf-born power. It's why Voss chose that night. The transformation would be agonizing while the moon calls to the wolf inside. Maximum suffering for maximum spectacle. But it could also help him, if I could reach him before the moon rises. Then his wolf would be at its strongest. Strong enough, perhaps, to complete your bond. Lysara gripped Sonara's shoulders. But you must understand, the completion isn't gentle. If Theron's wolf takes over during the blood moon, with you unmarked and vulnerable, it might kill me. It might. Lysara didn't flinch. The claiming bite should have killed you. The transformation is trying to kill you now. Your human body was never meant to contain wolf-born power. Every step of this path leads toward death. Sonara thought of Corvin, her sweet little brother waiting for medicine that would never arrive. Thought of her mother, who had died giving him life. Thought of all the deaths she'd witnessed. All the shadows she'd seen claim their victims while she stood helpless. I've been watching people die my whole life, she said quietly. Watching death take everyone I love while I could do nothing but see it coming. She lifted her chin. Not this time. This time, I choose. The servant met them at the kitchen entrance as promised, a middle-aged woman with nervous eyes who asked no questions. She dressed Sonara in servant's clothes, pressed a tray of bread and water into her hands, and pointed toward a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Third level, last cell on the left. The guards change at midnight. You'll have perhaps 10 minutes. Sonara nodded her thanks and descended. The wolf's bane hit her the moment she reached the first underground level. A burning sensation in her throat and chest that made every breath feel like swallowing fire. She pressed on, counting steps, fighting the urge to cough or stumble. The second level was worse. The third was agony. By the time she reached the last cell on the left, Sonara could barely stand. Her vision swam. Her heightening senses, so sharp above ground, had dulled to almost nothing, smothered by the poison in the air. But she could still feel the bond. Faint, flickering, alive. Theron, she whispered through the bars. Movement in the darkness. Chains rattling. And then a figure dragged itself into the thin torchlight. Sonara's heart shattered. He was barely recognizable. The proud warrior who had caught her in the carriage, the king who had carried her through forests. He had been reduced to something broken. Wounds covered every visible inch of skin. The dark weight of death clung to him so thickly she could barely see his features beneath it. But his eyes, those winter blue eyes opened at the sound of her voice, and they were still his. Sonara. Her name emerged as a croak. No. You can't be here. The wolf's bane. I know. She reached through the bars, her fingers finding his face. I don't care. You'll die. I was dying anyway. She managed a weak smile. The transformation. Lysara says I can't complete it without you. Understanding flickered in his gaze. Horror followed. No. He tried to pull away, but he was too weak. Sonara, the blood moon rises tomorrow. If you're here when it happens, if my wolf takes over while I'm like this, I won't be able to control myself. I'll claim you completely, and the violence of it. Then claim me now. The words left her before she could stop them. Complete the bond while you still have some control. Give us both a chance to survive. You don't understand. I understand everything. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I understand that I love you. That I've loved you since you looked at me in that carriage like I was something precious instead of something ordinary. That I would rather die in your arms than live 100 years without you. Theron stared at her. The chains rattled as he reached for her, his ruined hand cupping her cheek through the bars. Say it again, he whispered. I love you. A sound escaped him, half sob, half growl. I've waited centuries for someone to say those words. Convinced myself I'd never hear them. His thumb brushed away her tears. And now you're here, in this hell, telling me you love me while poison burns in your lungs and death stalks both our shadows. Pretty terrible timing, she admitted. Something like laughter rumbled in his chest. Terrible, he agreed. Above them, a bell began to toll. Midnight. The guards would be returning soon. The keys, Theron said urgently. There's a guard room at the end of the corridor. Second drawer. Synara, if you can... Footsteps echoed on the stairs. Too late. Torchlight flooded the corridor, and a voice Synara had hoped never to hear again cut through the darkness. Well, well. The Deathseer herself, delivered right to my doorstep. Lord Merrick Voss stepped into view, and his smile made her blood freeze. I was wondering when you'd come, he said pleasantly. I've been expecting you. Voss circled Synara like a predator savoring its prey. Do you know how long I've hunted your kind? He gestured at Theron's broken form. The Wolfborn are difficult to kill, resilient, irritatingly loyal to each other. But you... His colorless eyes gleamed. You're something different entirely. A Deathseer. I've read about your kind in ancient texts, so rare that most believe you're myth. What do you want? Synara's voice came out steadier than she felt. What I've always wanted. The complete eradication of the Wolfborn plague. Voss stopped before her, close enough that she could smell the wolf's bane on his clothes. But your gift offers something even better. You see death before it arrives. Imagine what I could do with that power at my command. Which enemies to strike, which battles to avoid, which prisoners have useful information left to give. I'll never help you. No? Voss glanced at Theron. What if I offered his life in exchange? Spare the Wolf King and you serve me. Refuse, and I execute him at dawn. Slowly, publicly, with every member of his precious pack forced to watch. Synara's heart cracked. She looked at Theron, at the chains binding him, at the shadow of death that had grown so dark she could barely see the man beneath. Don't, Theron rasped. Synara, don't you dare. Let me die. Promise me. I promise nothing. She turned back to Voss. You want my gift? Fine. But I have conditions. Voss's eyebrows rose. You're negotiating? I'm surviving. That's what I've always done. Synara lifted her chin. Release him first. Let me see him walk free. Then I'll serve you. You think me a fool? I think you're a man who wants something badly enough to consider the offer. She held his gaze. My gift doesn't work well under duress. Fear clouds the visions. If you want accuracy, you need me willing. And I'll never be willing while he's in chains. Voss studied her for a long moment. Behind him, guards shifted nervously. An interesting proposition. He smiled coldly. But I have a counteroffer. He moved faster than she expected. Human, but trained, brutal. His hand closed around her throat, slamming her against the bars of Theron's cell. I don't need you willing, Voss hissed. I just need you alive. Theron's roar shook the dungeon. Chains snapped taut as he threw himself against them, his eyes blazing gold, his human form rippling with something trying to break free. Don't touch her. The words were barely recognizable, more growl than speech. I'll tear out your throat. You'll do nothing. Voss tightened his grip on Synara's neck. You're dying, Wolf King. I've made certain of that. The poison in your blood will finish you before dawn whether I execute you or not. Synara's vision darkened at the edges. The wolf's bane in the air burned her lungs. Voss's fingers crushed her windpipe, and something inside her finally snapped. Not broke. Snapped. Like a chain pulled too tight. Like a door held shut too long. The power she'd used to push back Theron's poison, the golden light that had poured from her hands, it rose again. But this time, it didn't come gently. It erupted from her skin like wildfire, blasting Voss backward, sending guards sprawling, filling the dungeon with brilliance that burned away shadows. Synara collapsed to her knees, sucking in air. Her body was on fire. Her bones were reshaping. The transformation she'd been fighting for days, the wolf-born power that had been trying to claim her. It wasn't asking permission anymore. Synara! Theron's voice cut through the agony. Don't fight it. Let it happen. She tried to respond, but only a howl emerged. The pain was beyond anything she'd ever imagined. Her spine curved, elongated. Her hands became paws. Silver white fur erupted across skin that was no longer skin. And through it all, the bond blazed back to life, stronger than ever, a rope of fire connecting her to the man in the cell. She felt his shock, his awe, his desperate, terrified hope. When the transformation completed, Sonara stood on 4 legs, her new senses exploding with input. She could smell the wolf's bane, still burning but no longer fatal. She could hear heartbeats throughout the fortress. She could see in the darkness as clearly as daylight. And she could feel Theron, not just his presence, but his soul, calling to hers, completing hers. The cell bars meant nothing to her new form. She tore through them like paper, sending iron shrieking across stone. Voss was struggling to his feet, shouting for guards, but she ignored him. Only Theron mattered. She padded toward him, her wolf's heart breaking at the sight of his wounds. The chains that bound him were thick, heavy, designed to hold something far stronger than a weakened prisoner. But she wasn't weak. Not anymore. Sonara seized the chains in her jaws and pulled. Metal screamed, links shattered. And Theron slumped forward, free for the first time in days. Sonara. His voice was wonder and tears. He reached for her with trembling hands, burying his fingers in her silver-white fur. "You're beautiful. You're—" A crossbow bolt sliced past her ear. Guards were flooding the corridor. Voss had recovered, his face twisted with fury, a silver blade gleaming in his hand. "Kill them both!" he screamed. "Kill them now!" Theron tried to rise, but his body failed him. The poison had taken too much. Even with the chains gone, he couldn't stand. But Sonara could. She placed herself between Theron and the advancing guards, a growl building in her chest that resonated through the stone walls. The sound wasn't just noise. It was power. Wolf-born authority that made human soldiers hesitate. "You can't stop them all," Voss snarled, pushing through his men. "You're one wolf. One pathetic, newly turned—" Sonara's hand found the blood-marked stone in her pocket. She crushed it without hesitation. The dungeon wall exploded inward. Wolves poured through the breach, dozens of them, gray and black and russet, their eyes gleaming gold in the darkness. At their head ran Lysara in wolf form, her silver fur unmistakable. The pack had come. What followed was chaos. Wolves and soldiers clashing in the narrow corridors, screams and howls echoing off stone. Sonara grabbed Theron's tattered shirt in her jaws and dragged him toward the breach, toward freedom, toward the blood moon now rising above the mountains. They emerged into cold night air, and Sonara felt the moon's power wash over her like a tide. It called to something primal in her blood, something that had been waiting her entire life for this moment. "The claiming," Theron breathed. He'd managed to prop himself against a boulder, his chest heaving. "Sonara, the moon, it's amplifying everything. If you mark me now, while the power is at its peak, will it save you? It might." His eyes met hers, gold meeting gold, wolf recognizing wolf. "But it might also kill us both. The bond would be absolute. If one of us dies, then we die together." Sonara shifted back to human form, shivering in the moonlight. She knelt before him, cupping his ruined face in her hands. "I didn't fight my way through a dungeon and transform into a wolf just to watch you die on a mountainside." Something like laughter escaped him. "Stubborn woman. You're stubborn woman." She pressed her forehead to his. "Tell me how." "The throat." His voice had dropped to a growl. "Bite where the pulse beats strongest. Claim me as I claimed you." Sonara leaned closer, breathing in his scent, pine and storm and something wild that now smelled like home. She could see his pulse fluttering beneath winter-pale skin, could feel the bond humming between them, waiting to be completed. "I love you," she whispered. "I know." His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. I've known since the carriage. Since you looked at me with fear and curiosity, and something that felt like recognition. I've loved you since before I knew your name. Sonara pressed her lips to his throat, felt his pulse against her mouth. Let herself become what she'd been fighting since the moment his teeth marked her, and bit down. The world exploded into sensation, not pain, transcendence. Their souls crashed together like waves meeting shore. She felt everything he'd ever felt. Centuries of loneliness, the weight of kingship, the despair of poison eating him alive. And beneath it all, love. Fierce, desperate, eternal love that had been searching for her across lifetimes. Mine, her consciousness snarled. Yours, his answered. Always. Forever. Completely yours. The poison in his blood recoiled from their combined power. The shadow of death she'd seen clinging to him for so long began to burn away like mist in sunlight. She felt his strength returning, felt his wounds beginning to close, felt his heart beating stronger with every passing second. When she finally released him, they were both breathless. Theron's eyes had cleared. Color had returned to his face. The man who had been dying in a dungeon now looked at her with an intensity that made her soul sing. You saved me, he breathed. We saved each other. Around them, the battle had ended. Wolves surrounded the mountainside. Valdrin warriors shifted back to human form, their faces filled with awe. Lysara approached slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. It's complete, she whispered. The bond. I can see it now. Your threads woven so tightly they'll never unravel. Theron rose to his feet, pulling Sonara up with him. He shrugged off what remained of his tattered shirt and wrapped it around her shoulders before turning to face his people, one arm wrapped securely around her waist. My pack, he called, his voice carrying across the mountain. My family. I present to you Sonara of the Valdrin, my mate, my queen, my heart. The howl that rose from the assembled wolves shook the very stones. Dozens of voices raised in celebration, in welcome, in acceptance of something miraculous. Sonara let the sound wash over her, let herself lean into Theron's warmth, let herself finally believe that she was safe. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now? Theron pressed a kiss to her hair. Now I keep my promise. We find your brother. We bring him the medicine he needs. And then, his arms tightened around her. Then we go home. Together. Home. The word had never meant much to Sonara before. A cottage that was always too cold. A village that whispered about her gifts. A life spent watching death and feeling powerless. But looking up at Theron's face, feeling the bond pulse warm and steady between them, surrounded by a pack that had accepted her as one of their own. She understood. Home had never been a place. Home was him. And she was finally exactly where she was always meant to be.